Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what she meant. Second woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court after Sandra Day O'Connor, but has really become a rock star, more specifically in the last 5 to 10 years, and somebody that a lot of people admired and looked up to. And unfortunately, she had her moment for about 15 minutes, and then it became political. It did not take long before it's like, okay, who are we going to replace her with? Like, it felt wrong to me. That's a conversation to have for sure, but this was all Friday night, and it was 15 minutes later. Roshini Rajkumar is an executive coach, crisis communication expert, also a host here. Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO on Sundays. Roshini's on the CenterPoint Energy Home Service Plus hotline. Roshini, how are you?
I'm doing great. I will tell you, though, I've really been in mourning over the loss of the notorious RBG. I talked about it on Sunday. I even got a little emotional at the beginning of my show as we honored her because, what's amazing about her is she cuts through so many lines: generations, genders, race, economic background. Everybody really admired this woman, whether they agreed with her or not, including the late Justice Scalia.
Yeah, that was great to see some of those tidbits coming out about, hey, look, you had two polar opposites, but look at this. Even when they worked together, they had an admiration and a respect for each other, and I think that's something we can all hope for.
Exactly, and that's how we should be. You've seen and read a lot of quotes from her, and she really did stand for equality. She stood for the law, and I've got to believe she stood for the Constitution and how she behaved and how she lived as a jurist. And I'm staring at the second article of the Constitution, Section 2, which gives the president the power to nominate, and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to appoint all judges as well as judges of the Supreme Court. So it is a constitutional duty, and I would think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want both the Senate and the president to fulfill their constitutional duties.
Well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it, Roshini? Because it didn't take long, and I thought that was really in poor taste. The Republicans on Friday night. I don't care what political party you are. I just thought this was in poor taste for somebody that had such a lasting legacy. But just, okay, well, we're gonna push forward and look to replace her. It was just like, you could wait an hour or two, maybe, or a day to start talking about that. But it is interesting because both sides now are fighting, Republicans and Democrats, over who should fill this. Oh, we should wait till after the election and let the president pick, and then Republicans saying, well, we have a president now, and he should be able to pick. So you're saying, like, you look at the Constitution and that's what it says. I will say
that is what it says. It's the letter of the law. I highlighted it in yellow so I could really read directly from it today in talking with you. And Cory, based on what you just described, pockmarks on both their houses, because both parties got political right away, with our own Senator Klobuchar saying we should wait. Well, you know what? What the Democrats are saying, it's a foregone conclusion that we will be getting Joe Biden as a president. That's why they want to wait. I mean, the fact is there are still several months left in the current terms of the current Senate and the current United States president. Let them do their job. When you sit there with an 8-person Supreme Court, it also leaves other things hanging. There's a lot of work that the Supreme Court does. I mean, I'm a licensed attorney. As you know, I don't practice, but I went to law school. I've interviewed and spoken with and studied a lot of judges and cases. You don't just sit there with a seat left open. In fact, the framers didn't want you to. And there have been, I think I heard 29 different times when the quote-unquote lame duck Congress and the president selected the Supreme Court justice. So it would actually be terrible precedent if anyone waits until after the election, because even after the election, the current president is still the president, and he could move this at any time before January 20th.
Well, and I would just say, too, for the other party, in the Democrats in this case, if the roles were reversed, exactly reversed, they'd be doing the same thing. They'd be looking to push
through. And they did
through.
4 years ago. Yeah, I mean,
right.
And this is, the Republicans did this to the Democrats 4 years ago. So, payback is kind of a bitch. And I don't think it was right when this happened and the Republicans stalled President Obama 4 years ago. I mean, what we have to look to is the book. The book is the Constitution. And for those who don't follow the law, our U.S. senators are being unconstitutional. Now, the president, I will give him some credit. We're hearing he will announce his picks on Saturday. Guess what? That is after the mourning period for Justice Ginsburg, which is happening. Her body is going to be lying in state this week. There are private and more public ceremonies through Friday. So he's waiting until Saturday. And I mean, I am nonpartisan. I am looking at what is beautiful behavior, waiting a few days, but then let's get back to the Constitution after we've properly mourned her and memorialized her, and then let's get this position filled.
Yeah, we're talking with Roshini Rajkumar here, host on WCCO, Real Talk with Roshini. Let's change topics here, Roshini. The Minnesota State High School League reversing course on football and volleyball. I want to get your thoughts on here in terms of leadership and making a change, 4, 5, 6 weeks after you had made a decision. How do you view this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. It also makes a lot of us really wonder, what are we not being told about COVID and testing and things like this? Is it all a bunch of scare tactics? Because this stuff and these reversals of decisions are happening very much because of gaps in money or losses in funds. And so it's really hard to have a straight-faced argument, as we say in the law. Can you really have a straight-faced argument that any of this has anything to do with COVID? But I agree. I heard you talking about this earlier in the show. It is okay to change your mind if you are going for the greater good, and the greater good of kids playing, getting up outside, as well as the coffers being refilled in some way. That could be deemed the greater good. I'm personally excited these sports are getting back on track.
Well, and I just think, too, and whether it's this decision or something else, lots of times, especially in the world we're living in now, where we're getting new information all the time, things are changing so rapidly all the time that sometimes you equip yourself with new information, or things have settled a little bit. And I'm not even saying that's the case. I mean, we have dipped our toes into schools, and things seem to be going, pretty well. But I mean, who knows? I mean, we don't know if they start playing football, if that'll change something, or volleyball. I mean, we don't know. But I do think that, I think they made a cautious decision, and in a pandemic, I'm not going to fault anyone for that. I would rather err on the side of caution in not knowing what could happen, and you never want to drive numbers up.
Exactly. Erring on the side of caution, never a bad idea. But then being able to cut yourself a break, cut some of these leaders a break if they say, you know what, we've kind of assessed things. We don't think the sky will fall if we do this. Let's try this. I mean, we're basically living week by week, day by day, Cory, this year. This doesn't really change that fact. And so hopefully we can all see these young people get out there, play these sports, and there won't be any big cataclysmic events that happens.
Roshini, I got to ask you about something that happened on your show on Sunday. You had a former prosecutor, George Perry, I believe his name is, on the show, yeah. And he talked about the George Floyd case. And this, it's a message that has gone everywhere. And just can you real quickly just tell me what he told you, and let's start there.
He's featured in a new documentary that will be coming out called The Death of George Floyd. An article that George Perry wrote that was sent to me by a federal prosecutor from North Dakota in the American Spectator assessed the George Floyd case, looked at the medical examiner's report, looked at how the officers were charged before the toxicology report came out. And George Perry said, as a former federal prosecutor, as someone who actually ran in Philadelphia an office against police misconduct and brutality, he said, and I quote, he called this prosecutorial team incompetent. He said they should not have charged those 4 officers with any degree of murder, and especially should have waited until after the toxicology came out. So this video, we did it on Facebook and Twitter Live on Sunday. It was on my show on Sunday. It is approaching 50,000 views. It's had a reach of more than 75,000. I mean, people are sharing it left and right. I've heard about it from different people. It was a WCCO radio exclusive. George Perry had never been on any kind of broadcast. Now he's featured in this documentary. The same article is what inspired the documentarian to focus. His name is Fleming Fuller. Decades ago, he did a documentary called Murder One, among other credits. George Perry's article in the American Spectator inspired this documentarian to make him the narrator of the documentary. So I was just amazed, and this is all happening like I didn't even know the documentary was coming out when I read his article. I was just so amazed at how he very directly and succinctly, according to the law, and that's what I'm always going with, and the Constitution, said that none of these officers should have been charged. So it's going to be interesting, Cory, as this plays out. I also spoke with Earl Gray ahead of speaking with George Perry on my show, and he said he's got some new evidence he's trying to get in order to get his own client, Thomas Lane, out of those charges. So it's really interesting. I highly recommend people watch that from the 1 o'clock hour on Sunday on the WCCO Radio Facebook Live page. You will be impressed with how clear this person is describing something that he has no horse in the race on this case.
Yeah.
He's just talking about the law.
I guess, and my problem with that is when somebody says, well, we should just drop the charges here, one, people need to be held responsible. But also, two, isn't that what the court system's for? Like, you go through the trial so that, they're either found guilty or not guilty. And to me, that would be, well, you go through the process and then you can decide that. And I don't know, the lawyers that I've talked to, and there's been a couple different ones that both of them have said, like, of course these charges should not be dropped. So I find it,
here's the thing.
Interesting to me.
I agree with you on charges, but if they're mischarges or if they're overly charged, then no prosecutor is going to win in court. And I've also talked to many attorneys who have said maybe there's something there, especially for Derek Chauvin, along the lines of a reckless endangerment or a different kind of charge. What we have to remember is the body camera video off of these officers was not released right away. That is where we can start the clock on the incident that night. And if you watch the video from there and don't jump ahead in time to the Facebook video, which is terrible video, it's terrible. But if you start at the clock with when those couple officers first came upon him, how polite they are, how they're trying to get him medical information. One of the officers even jumped into the ambulance with him. If you start there, it's very hard to find any kind of intent. When we have a second-degree murder charge, there's intent involved there. And so these are elements of the crime that need to be proven by the prosecutors. It's going to be very difficult for them to prove those charges. And then, in court, after a lot of emotional and financial resources have been expended, they still could end up being found not guilty. But if they were mischarged in the first place, then that is a crime in itself, a crime in the, in the kind of philosophical sense of the word. Because, Cory, if any person who's truly innocent is convicted of a crime that they didn't commit, then we're really all screwed. And that is why I had George Perry on, to help people understand the law and how the system should operate for anyone.
Yeah. Roshini, good conversation. Wish we had more time, but thank you for jumping on.
Thank you, Cory. Have a great day.
You too. Roshini Rajkumar there.